Hey guys. Tony's eldest son, Kevin, and partner, Faith, dropped a bombshell.
It's still not easy sometimes because Tony does not like to hear that he's wrong. I made that number up. I pulled it out of air.
Kevin Beets didn't just question his roots, he shattered the very foundation of the Beets family legacy. The DNA test confirmed his worst fears. Tony Beets, the man who raised him, wasn't his biological father. This revelation wasn't just a shock. It was a seismic event that left the family reeling and their gold mining empire teetering on the edge. Let us dive deeper into the fallout, the betrayals, and the unexpected alliances that have turned this family saga into a high-stakes drama. A legacy shaken. Kevin Beets didn't just drop a bombshell, he dropped the whole mine. This wasn't just some minor family spat, this was an earthquake that shook the Beets family tree right down to its roots. Kevin had been the golden child of the Beets mining legacy, raised in the shadow of Tony Beets, the loud, larger-than-life patriarch of the gold mining world. To everyone on the outside, Kevin was Tony's heir through and through, a chip off the old block. He'd spent his life working shoulder to shoulder with Tony, digging, dredging, and sweating under the weight of carrying on the family name. But as it turns out, the name might not have been his to carry after all. But then Kevin dropped one final bombshell. One so shocking it could shatter the Beets legacy forever. It all started with whispers. Not the kind you hear in a gold rush town, these were the quiet murmurs of doubt that crept into his mind over the years. Something always felt a little off.
We've been thinking that perhaps this year we might take it off.
His siblings had Tony's fiery temper and trademark rugged look, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't quite fit the mold. He ignored it at first, chalking it up to paranoia or maybe just a case of imposter syndrome. After all, he was raised in this family, lived this life, and wore the Beets name like armor. But the questions wouldn't go away. Family gatherings didn't help. Older relatives would make offhand comments or exchange odd glances when he was around. It felt like they were in on some secret that he wasn't. He laughed it off, shrugged it off, and buried himself in work. But deep down, the unease was growing. It wasn't just about looking different or feeling different, it was about belonging. Could he really be a Beets if he felt like an outsider in his own family? One day he decided he'd had enough. The whispers in his mind had grown too loud to ignore. He quietly ordered a DNA test, keeping it to himself because, let's face it, asking, "Hey, am I really your kid?" isn't exactly dinner table conversation. Maybe he thought it would be a quick way to silence his doubts. Maybe he was looking for reassurance. What he got was anything but. When the results came in, his world turned upside down. Tony Beets wasn't his biological father. Let that sink in for a moment. The man he had spent his entire life looking up to, working alongside, and trying to live up to wasn't his dad.
How's it going, Kevin?
I got 2 out already, you can see.
Yeah.
The family legacy he'd poured his blood, sweat, and tears into, it wasn't his by blood. The news hit like a freight train, leaving him reeling. Everything he thought he knew about himself, everything he'd built his life around suddenly felt like a lie. But he didn't wallow in self-pity. He's not that kind of guy. Instead, he started to think about what this meant for him and his future. DNA might tell you who your biological parents are, but it doesn't define who you are. He knew that. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that staying in the family business would be like living someone else's life. He needed to figure out who he was, apart from the Beets name and legacy. And to do that, he had to step away. Breaking the news to the family was brutal. He called a meeting with Tony, his mom Minnie, and his siblings. There was no easy way to say it, so he just laid it out. The DNA results, the truth, the fact that Tony wasn't his biological dad. The room went silent. Tony, the man known for his tough-as-nails attitude and unshakable confidence, looked like he'd just been hit by a rock slide. For a guy who'd faced down countless mining disasters, this was something else entirely. Minnie tried to hold the family together, reminding everyone that blood isn't what makes a family. Love and shared memories do. And she was right, of course, but no amount of comforting words could change the fact that this revelation had rocked the foundation of their family. Tony had spent years grooming Kevin to take over the business, teaching him the tricks of the trade and trusting him with massive responsibilities. Now he had to come to terms with the fact that his chosen successor wasn't his biological heir. It wasn't just a blow to Tony's pride, it made him question everything. For Kevin, walking away wasn't about anger or resentment. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone, he just needed space to figure out who he was, away from the shadow of Tony and the weight of the Beets legacy. Staying in the family business felt like pretending to be someone he wasn't, and he wasn't about to live a lie. So he handed over his responsibilities to his siblings and started exploring other paths. It wasn't easy. Mining was all he had ever known. It wasn't just a job, it was a way of life. Walking away felt like leaving a piece of himself behind. But he knew it was the right move. He needed to find his own identity, outside of the Beets name and the gold mining world. That meant stepping into the unknown, trying new things, and figuring out what he really wanted out of life. Despite the distance, he didn't cut ties with his family completely. He still cared about them, and they still cared about him. The bond they shared wasn't broken, it was just different now. The truth had changed things, but it hadn't erased the years of love, laughter, and shared experiences that made them a family. His journey wasn't just about finding himself, it was about redefining what family means. For years, he'd lived under the assumption that blood was everything. But as he stepped away from the Beets legacy and started building a life of his own, he realized that family is about more than DNA. It's about the people who stand by you, support you, and love you, no matter what. And that's a legacy worth carrying on. Kevin's plans took a sharp turn when Tony made an unexpected choice: forging gold beyond the Klondike. He always seemed like he was on track to follow in Tony Beets' footsteps, digging for gold and building a mining empire. From the time he was a teenager, he was right there in the thick of it. Long days, heavy machinery, and the relentless grind of the Klondike. Everyone assumed he'd take over the family business someday, but things don't always go as planned, and sometimes the path you're expected to take just doesn't fit. Things started to shift when Tony made a surprising decision. Instead of handing the reins over to Kevin, he chose Monica, Kevin's younger sibling, to carry on the family legacy. That decision hit hard. After years of proving himself, it felt like a slap in the face. Kevin wasn't just disappointed, he was angry. That anger turned into action, and he decided he wouldn't stick around and play second fiddle. He walked away. Leaving the family business was no small thing. The Beets mining operation wasn't just a job, it was a lifestyle, a legacy, and a family bond. But stepping out of that shadow felt necessary for Kevin to figure out who he really was. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the right one. He needed to start fresh, even if it meant starting from scratch. Starting from scratch in the mining world is no cakewalk. It requires land, equipment, and a significant investment. Kevin didn't have those resources, but he had determination and an unlikely ally. Enter Parker Schnabel, Tony's longtime rival. Kevin struck a deal with Parker, purchasing a rock truck for over $100,000. It was a bold move, stretching his budget to the breaking point. But it wasn't just about the truck, it was about making a statement. He was carving his own path. The road wasn't smooth. Kevin faced financial struggles, self-doubt, and moments when he wondered if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. He missed the rhythm of the family business, the camaraderie, the adrenaline of striking gold, the familiar chaos of mining life. But he couldn't go back. He had to see this through. As Kevin built his new life, he explored other interests. He dabbled in tech startups, environmental conservation projects, and even considered opening a small business. These ventures were a far cry from mining but reflected who he was becoming, someone not defined by a family name or legacy. For the first time, he felt in control of his destiny. Meanwhile, back at the Beets operation, the family adjusted to his absence. His siblings had to pick up the slack, and Tony had to come to terms with the fact that Kevin wasn't coming back. It wasn't easy for anyone, but they pushed forward. The family's mining empire was built on grit, and nothing would shake their foundation, not even his departure. As time passed, Kevin started finding his footing. He learned to trust his instincts, take risks, and embrace the unknown. Each new venture taught him something about himself, offering a newfound sense of freedom. He was no longer just Tony's son, but someone forging his own way. The revelation that Tony wasn't his biological father added another layer to the story. For Kevin, it was more confirmation than revelation. He'd always felt like he didn't quite fit, and now he knew why. Instead of letting it define him, he used it as motivation. Family isn't just about DNA, it's about the connections you build, the values you hold, and the choices you make. Kevin's journey shows that life doesn't always go according to plan, and that's okay. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the greatest growth. Walking away from everything he'd known was tough, but in doing so, he found himself. His story proves that you don't have to follow a path laid out for you. You can blaze your own trail and create a life that's truly your own. His transition from mining to new ventures wasn't instant. He had to unlearn the rhythms of the gold-digging lifestyle and adapt to different kinds of work. Mining had always been straightforward: move dirt, find gold, repeat. But his new pursuits demanded creativity, networking outside the industry, and tackling problems without clear solutions. It was like learning to walk all over again. In the early days, Kevin struggled with self-doubt. Stepping away from an entire identity was daunting. For so long, he'd been the heir to Tony Beets' empire. Without that title, he felt untethered. But over time, he saw the opportunity to become someone new. He threw himself into renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and other fields he'd never considered. Through books, workshops, and connections with experts, he turned ideas into reality. It was a steep learning curve, but Kevin had never shied away from hard work. One of his first major projects was an ecotourism venture. He combined his love of the outdoors with a desire to create something meaningful, investing in land damaged by past mining operations. Kevin began restoring it, aiming to create a space for conservation education and habitat preservation. It was a far cry from the Klondike gold mines, but felt right. Restoring the land was a massive undertaking with plenty of challenges. But step by step, the land began to heal. Grass grew where barren dirt had been, and animals returned. For Kevin, those changes were more rewarding than any gold nugget he'd ever unearthed. As Kevin's ecotourism venture started to take shape, he found himself reflecting on his journey. He'd come a long way from the boy who'd spent his summers working on his dad's mining crews. He was no longer chasing someone else's dream, he was building his own. And while it hadn't been an easy road, he wouldn't have had it any other way. The DNA revelation added a deeper layer to his story. It forced him to confront questions about identity and belonging that he'd been wrestling with for years. But instead of letting those questions hold him back, he used them as a springboard for growth. He realized that he didn't need to be defined by his past or by his biological connections. What mattered was the life he was building and the person he was becoming. Leaving the family business was only the start of Kevin's biggest challenge: a miner's fight for independence. His journey is a testament to the power of resilience and self-discovery. It's about finding the courage to walk away from what's comfortable and familiar even when it's terrifying. It's about taking risks, embracing uncertainty, and trusting that you have what it takes to create a life that feels authentic. And most of all, it's about understanding that your worth isn't tied to your name, your family, or your past. It's tied to who you are and the choices you make every day. Cutting ties with his father was like a bomb going off in the world of gold mining. Imagine putting years of blood, sweat, and tears into building your empire, only to watch your own son step away and join forces with someone you'd rather not see at the family dinner table. That's exactly what happened. And let's just say it wasn't taken lightly. This wasn't just business, it was a family feud turned public. Tony Beets has always been a titan in the mining world. He's tough, relentless, and doesn't back down from a challenge, but now he's facing a different kind of battle. Seeing his son team up with a longtime rival was a hard pill to swallow. It felt like a betrayal, a slap in the face from someone he'd spent years raising and grooming to take over the family business. And it wasn't just about mining anymore. This was personal. On the other hand, walking away from the family name wasn't an easy decision, but partnering with Parker was a way of proving independence. It was a risky move, no doubt about it. The mining world isn't kind to newcomers, even ones with a famous last name. All eyes were on him, waiting to see if he'd rise to the challenge or crumble under the pressure. Joining Parker's camp gave him a shot at independence, but it also painted a big target on his back. People wanted to see if he could succeed without the Beets name propping him up. Meanwhile, back at the Beets camp, things were far from smooth. Monica, his sister, found herself stepping up in ways she hadn't expected. Running operations, dealing with the fallout of his departure, and keeping the family's mining empire afloat became her new normal. But let's be honest, this wasn't just about managing equipment and schedules. Monica was carrying the weight of family expectations, and it wasn't easy. The rivalry between Tony and Parker had always been intense, but now it had a new edge. Every gold haul, every setback, every little move was scrutinized. Fans couldn't get enough of the drama. On one side, you had Tony, the old-school miner who'd built his empire from nothing. On the other, there was Parker, younger, bolder, and unafraid to take risks. And caught in the middle was Kevin, trying to carve out his own space in a world dominated by these two giants. This wasn't just mining for gold, it was mining for independence. Partnering with Parker was a way of proving he could do things his own way. But let's not sugarcoat it. This was a gamble. He was walking away from the safety net of the family business and into uncharted territory. Sure, Parker's help gave him a leg up, but it also came with strings attached. People were watching, waiting to see if he'd make it or if he'd fall flat on his face. Back at the Beets camp, Tony was doubling down. Losing a key player wasn't just losing a worker, it was losing a part of his legacy. For someone who'd poured everything into building the Beets name, this was a tough blow. But if there's one thing Tony knows how to do, it's fight. He threw himself into the work, determined to show the world that the Beets family was still a force to be reckoned with. But the cracks were starting to show. Monica was doing her best to keep things steady, but the weight of it all was taking a toll. The family business wasn't just business anymore, it was a battleground. As for Parker, he was playing his cards well. Teaming up with Kevin wasn't just about helping out a rival's son, it was a smart business move. Parker knew what he was doing, and this alliance only made him stronger. It was a calculated risk, but one that paid off. He wasn't just building his own empire, he was driving a wedge deeper into the Beets family drama. The mining world is tough, unforgiving, and full of challenges. But for the Beets family, it's also deeply personal. Kevin's decision to strike out on his own has left a ripple effect that's changed everything. Tony is fighting to hold on to his legacy. Monica is stepping up in ways she never expected. And Kevin is out there trying to prove he's more than just a Beets. Whether this gamble will pay off or end in disaster, only time will tell. One thing's for sure, the Beets family drama is far from over. Will Kevin's bold move shatter the Beets legacy or redefine it forever? Share your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.